안녕하세요.
The morning sun streamed through the large conference room windows, illuminating the figure of one of the most powerful CEOs in the country, Ji-hoon. At 35 years old, with his impeccable posture and piercing gaze, he was accustomed to making decisions that shaped the future of his corporation. His presence was commanding, his rare smiles only adding to the air of authority he exuded. Yet, despite his carefully orchestrated world revolving around business and responsibilities, a persistent emptiness lingered in his life. As Ji-hoon flipped through the documents in front of him, a young secretary entered the room silently. Min-ji, always composed, carried a warm smile and a respectful demeanor. Unlike most, she was one of the few who did not seem intimidated by the distant aura of her boss. She had been working at the company for 3 years, leading a life that starkly contrasted with Ji-hoon's. Her days were simple, waking up early to help her family and dedicating herself fully to her job. The difference between them was striking, yet there was something about Min-ji that caught Ji-hoon's attention. "Mr. Ji, the financial reports you requested are ready," she said, her voice soft yet firm, unfazed by his imposing presence. Ji-hoon looked up, and for a brief moment, their eyes met. She held the folder of documents with both hands, her expression calm, but there was something in her eyes, perhaps kindness or sincerity, that made him observe her more intently than usual. "Thank you, Min-ji," he replied, his voice unusually gentle. Min-ji hesitated for a moment before turning to leave, but something inside her had shifted. She couldn't ignore the feeling that, in that fleeting exchange, there had been something more, something she couldn't quite name. She left the room with her heart beating slightly faster. Yet, she knew their differences were insurmountable. He was a billionaire CEO, and she was just a secretary. Destiny would never bring them together, she told herself. She had to continue with her life, her routine, and ignore whatever emotions were beginning to stir within her. But Ji-hoon couldn't get Min-ji out of his mind. He knew she was just an employee, yet he felt something inexplicable toward her. He had met countless women in his life, but none had touched him the way Min-ji had, with her simplicity and quiet strength. He noticed her demeanor, how she never sought attention, and how she treated everyone around her with respect. What he didn't know was that this feeling would soon grow stronger, leading them both down a difficult path. "I need to talk to her again," Ji-hoon thought to himself. Min-ji, on the other hand, tried to go about her day as usual. She knew nothing could ever happen between them, but her heart refused to forget that brief moment. As the day progressed, she found herself increasingly distracted, unable to shake the strange turmoil growing inside her, an emotional confusion she didn't know how to handle. She was drawn to him. What should have been a fleeting attraction was quickly turning into something deeper. Yet, she wasn't sure if she should follow this path, especially when the consequences of a relationship between them would be immense. After all, she was just an employee, and he was the billionaire CEO of one of the country's largest corporations. The following days were marked by a growing tension that Ji-hoon could not shake. He found himself watching Min-ji from afar more often, noticing the small details that made her unique, the way she meticulously handled her tasks, the softness in her voice, the patience with which she dealt with others. He had never paid attention to such things before, yet now, her simplicity captivated him more than any wealth or luxury he possessed. He had everything he could ever want except her. On a particularly difficult morning, Ji-hoon sat in his conference room, trying to focus on the company's numbers and pressing matters, but his mind kept drifting back to Min-ji. He couldn't understand why he was so drawn to her, but something within him was changing. Min-ji entered the room to deliver a new set of documents, her serene presence once again breaking the tense silence. She did her best to keep her eyes fixed on the papers, but she could sense that something was different. Ji-hoon was quieter than usual, and an unspoken tension filled the air. "Mr. Ji, the marketing reports are ready. They should help with the upcoming quarter's decisions," she said, handing over the papers with her usual respectful demeanor. However, the way he looked at her more intensely than before did not go unnoticed. Ji-hoon studied her carefully. "Thank you, Min-ji. Please have a seat for a moment. I need to discuss something with you." She hesitated briefly before sitting across from him, curiosity mixed with a hint of nervousness. He had never asked to speak with her like this before. "Min-ji, I want to know more about you," he said, his voice carrying a rare vulnerability. "You've proven to be incredibly capable and dedicated to your work. That doesn't go unnoticed." Min-ji was taken aback by his sudden interest. She never expected him to have noticed her efforts. She was simply doing her job just like anyone else. But here he was, acknowledging her in a way that felt different, more personal. A slight warmth crept up her cheeks, but she maintained her composure. I appreciate that, Mr. G. I just try to do my job to the best of my ability. We all have our responsibilities," she replied, averting her gaze. But Ji-hoon wasn't satisfied with that answer. He sensed something deeper, something she either didn't realize or refused to acknowledge. He wanted more. He wanted to understand what she truly thought, what she truly felt. "Min-ji, I would like to go out with you sometime, not as your boss and employee, but as two people who might understand each other," he said hesitantly. His face remained serious, and the words felt as though they had been bottled up for too long, waiting for the right moment to surface. She looked at him, her eyes widening in surprise. Such a direct invitation was unexpected, and a mix of emotions flooded her: excitement, confusion, and fear. She knew what he was asking. He wanted to spend time with her outside of work, in a way that blurred the boundaries of their professional relationship. But that was unthinkable. They came from completely different worlds. "Mr. G, this isn't a good idea," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "You're my boss, and I'm just an employee. We can't cross those lines." A heavy silence filled the room, as if his words still lingered in the air between them. But Ji-hoon wasn't ready to give up. He knew something had begun between them, and he couldn't just let it slip away without trying, without understanding what it could become. "I know that's how you feel, Min-ji, but I can't just let this go without trying," he said, his sincerity making time stand still. "I know the difference between us is vast, but I see something in you that I don't see in anyone else, something that draws me in." Min-ji's heartbeat quickened, but fear and doubt kept her from responding. How could she allow herself to fall into something impossible? She was painfully aware of her position, of how difficult, perhaps even dangerous, it would be for both of them to pursue this. "I need to think about this, Mr. G," she said abruptly, rising from her chair. "I need time." She left the room quickly, leaving Ji-hoon alone, sitting at the table, watching the door close behind her. Confusion consumed him. He knew she was hesitant, but what he felt for her was real, and he had no idea how to make it go away. The days following Ji-hoon's invitation were agonizing. While he found himself consumed by the thought of being closer to Min-ji, she desperately tried to suppress the emotions growing inside her. She knew their relationship could never happen, no matter how much they both wanted it. At the office, she did her best to remain professional. She poured herself into her responsibilities, yet every interaction with Ji-hoon became more intense and challenging. Every glance exchanged, every word spoken, only seemed to strengthen the connection they were both trying to deny. One afternoon, Ji-hoon called her into his office again, this time to discuss a crucial matter regarding the company's future. It was an opportunity for Min-ji to prove her competence, but it was also a difficult moment, as the atmosphere between them felt increasingly charged. "Min-ji, I want you to oversee the documentation for the international expansion. My vision for the company's future depends on it. You're the only one I trust to handle this," Ji-hoon said firmly. Yet, in his eyes, there was an unexpected softness. She looked at him, doing her best to remain unaffected. "Of course, Mr. G. I'll do my best," she replied, her voice sounding colder than what she truly felt. Ji-hoon watched as she walked away. Her determination to keep things professional was evident, but to him, that only made him want to break through her barriers even more. He understood that Min-ji had her fears. He couldn't push her, but he also wasn't willing to give up. That night, after another long meeting, Ji-hoon made a decision. He walked to Min-ji's office, determined to find a way past the wall she had built between them. When he entered, she was deeply focused on her work, her head down, as she typed furiously on her computer. She didn't even notice his presence until he cleared his throat. "Min-ji, I need to talk to you," he said, his voice gentle but firm. as if he had made up his mind about something important. She looked up at him, letting out a quiet sigh. "What is it, Mr. G?" He stepped closer, his expression serious. "I can't go on like this. I know you're trying to keep your distance, but I feel like there's something between us. Something we can't just ignore." Minji stood up, instinctively taking a step back to create more space. The tension in the air was thick, and she didn't know how to respond. She wanted to push him away, to deny everything, but at the same time, there was a part of her that wanted to believe his words, that wanted something more. "You don't understand, Ji-hoon. We come from different worlds. I'm just your secretary, and you're the CEO of the biggest company in the country. There's no way this could ever work," she said, her voice trembling. "I know that," he admitted, "but this isn't just about being CEO and secretary. It's about what we feel. We can't just pretend it's not there." His gaze locked onto hers, filled with an intensity that made her heart race. Minji turned away, trying to hold onto her composure. She knew he was telling the truth, but she also knew how risky this was. She didn't want to put Ji-hoon in a difficult position, and more than that, she didn't want to be the cause of any complications in his life. I need more time, Mr. G. Please, understand," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Ji-hoon studied her for a long moment before nodding. "I understand, Minji, but I can't promise this feeling will go away. I'll wait. And when you're ready, I hope you'll give me a chance." He took a step back, his expression serious but filled with silent hope. Minji looked at him, her eyes glistening with unshed tears, but she couldn't find the words to respond. Ji-hoon walked out of the room, leaving her alone, drowning in the weight of her conflicted emotions. As she turned toward the window, a deep ache settled in her chest. She wanted to believe in him. She wanted to believe that something real could exist between them. But the fear of losing everything she hadn't, the uncertainty of how this would all end, kept her from giving in to that desire.
You're my eternal